touch it. See, it's me. I don't go near electronics. So thank you. And Chris Bell is the director of the foundation, and he is going to tell you more important things.
Thank you all for being here. So good to see you. This is Timucua. It's the living room of Benoit and Elaine Glazer, and we've hosted 700 concerts here. They're amazing people to open up their home to anyone week after week, and it's every Sunday night. We do a donation-based event, and people come, and it's a really special thing. So we have a membership program. If you're new and you're in town and you want to support us, our members are the people who make this possible. Without our members, these events would go away. So we hope that you'll consider join our email list. Talk to us after the show. Wendy is one of our board members, so another round of applause for Wendy. And we hope that you'll come back for one of our musical events at any point.
Thursday night.
Yeah, Thursday night we have Vivacity, the Nostalgia Radio Hour. It's this really cool, fun take on the American Songbook, kind of in the guise of a radio play, like a live radio play that they do on stage. It's really cool. And then next Sunday night we have the Fernwood String Quartet, which is a quartet made up of local musicians here in town, and they're playing a mix of, there's some Haydn and Ravel, and then a contemporary composer who lives in town, Charles Griffin. So it's a mix of things. And we do something different every week, and it's a really special, eclectic gift to the community, and the community makes it possible. So we hope that if you're ever in town again from Jacksonville, that you'll come by, and if you live in town, we definitely hope that you'll come back. This event is being live streamed, so if you want to share that information with your people on social media, now's the time to do that. You can find us on Facebook at Timucua Arts Foundation, and we just posted the link to our YouTube live stream. And so you just look up TIMUCUA Arts will come up, and the first post will be about this event, and the second post will be about the live stream, so you can share that. I'm just talking right now because I see that half of you are doing this as I speak. So I'm just giving you time to do that before, what was that? I didn't know everything. Right.
There's a link on the website.
Yes, on our Facebook page. It's not on our website, not at timucua.com, but it's on our Facebook page. Or you can search Timucua Arts on YouTube. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Darlene, who is organizing and orchestrating this night's event. So please give a big round of applause to Darlene.
Hey, welcome to Orlando, my new Jacksonville friends. And I don't know how to do this. It's up over my head, Bradley. Help. Can you hear me without the mic? Leave it alone then. I'm good. Southeast Sister Cities reading tour is exactly what it sounds like. Brad and I know writers all over the Southeast, mostly in Florida, and we love our writer friends. We admire and respect them, and we thought after we left Orlando, where we had lived for 30 years, that it might be a great idea after we moved to Jacksonville to get our new friends together with our old friends. And I think the brilliant Tim Gilmore may have been the first person who said, hey, that might be a good idea. And I said, hey, I'm going to do it, because that's the way I do things, very impulsively. We went down to we took a group down to St. Pete, then St. Pete came to Jacksonville. This is our second event. Now we're in Orlando, and then we're going to have some Orlando writers come up to see us in Jax. It's very important that when we get back to Jacksonville, you guys show up and support the Orlando folks. And we're glad you're all here. Now, I want to thank Joe Hayes, the playwright, and Jennifer Greenhill Taylor, who are hosting us here in town. They're lovely people. Please get to know them. They're right over here. You won't be sorry. You can thank me later that you've met them. And Joe's got a play coming here when? July 15th, and the name is?
Destination Moon.
Destination Moon, and it sounded fantastic. fantastic when he was telling us about it this afternoon. So be sure that you keep in touch with what's happening there. Now, the way that Southeast Sister Cities Reading Tour works is we have a top hat, and the top hat has people's bios in them. And we pull a name out and read that bio, and that person comes up and reads. And that's because I'm chicken, I love you all, and I'm not about to sit here and try to put a show flow together and have people getting mad about what order they read in and all that nonsense. So we just leave it to chance. I know nobody likes to go first, however, so I'm going to take the pain of that, and I'm going to read you one poem of mine. And the people who were here in Orlando and have known me for years probably know the origins of this, but I wrote a book called Sewing Holes, and it's a fictionalized account of my family, and there's an item in there about my father that really did happen. And after we moved up to Jacksonville, my mother passed away, and we went over to clean out the house that they had lived in since I was in 4th grade. And this is about that experience of boxing some things up or unboxing some things. I'm sorry. You're going to do that? Okay. No, that's all right. Pay no attention to the man in the corner. Thank you. Is that better? No one else is as short as me, so don't go away. This is called Boxes. They are dusty, endless. Cranky and tired, I implore my husband to stop handing down boxes from Mama's attic, to stop insisting we clear it all out today, to stop, to please, for the love of all that's holy, just stop. He knows me. He loves me. He can see I'm over this incessant sorting, these perpetual decisions to keep, toss, sell, or deliver to people she loved, the items she tenderly wrapped and kept and labeled, things they almost invariably decline with sad, ungrateful smiles. He stacks the boxes in the garage and tiptoes out, leaving me in silent fury to fume as sole survivor, the responsible one who always has to handle things no one else will handle. Interminable, these rubber band-bound bundles of bills paid decades ago, these monotonous bank statements sadly lacking in zeros, this amaranthine documentation of 80 years of thrift store accumulation, and then I open a box, and there they lie, gone, but not forgotten for 40 years. I had forgotten the stripes. I knew they were sky blue, and I'd remembered the elegant piping. And the blood, I remembered the blood, so much blood. Blood that when washed resembled nothing worse than a splash of spilled coffee. A whole pot of spilled coffee. I lift Daddy's pajamas from the box. They smell of attic dust and time, nothing more. As she had done so long ago, I hugged them to my chest, wrapped their ghostly arms around myself, and rock, keening in silence, holding her, holding him. So now to know what I was talking about, you have to buy the book, Sewing Holes. Oh boy, are we kicking it off with like the awesome. Sean Welcome is a Brooklyn, New York native, but has lived in Orlando, Florida since 1993. He's been actively engaged in community work since 2006 with the launch of a poetry and life skills program for youth offenders at the 33rd Street Jail. That same year, he also founded Diverse Word at Dandelion Community Cafe, a weekly open mic poetry night which attracts not only poets, but singers, comedians, and rappers from all over the city in a celebration of self-expression. Professionally, he's given himself to youth-related area and nonprofit organizations, including the Hope Community Center, Boys and Girls Club, Page 15, Frontline Outreach Community Center, and the Professional Opportunities Programs for Students, called POPs. He led and sponsored Oak Ridge High School's Poetry Club. Sean authored and published H2O, Immersed in Verse, in 2013, and has written and performed NBA commercials for the Orlando Magic and performed in countless faith-based functions. He currently serves as a family engagement coordinator of MVP Families for the Polis Institute, a community engagement effort for academic success. Sean, welcome.
I'll do that. I don't know if I need the microphone. I tend to project and such, but I'm glad you all are here. Welcome, Jacksonvillians. I don't know, that sounds bad. So the first piece I'll do, and these pieces tend to be longer, so I'll do maybe 3 of them to make sure I stay within the time frame. It's called Shades of Grey. I did write it before the movie came out. Don't judge me, whatever. It's about just kind of some of these nuances. And when I was a tutor at Wekiva High School with AmeriCorps, it's kind of expressing some of those nuances in language and that sort of thing. So I'll start with that and move forward. All right, here we go. Esau, English for speakers of other languages. It's the classroom in public schools you might qualify for if you have an accent for a smoother transition into the fluent majority. Besides the poetry, I'm a tutor at Wekiva High School, which is like the mall cop of teachers, badge, no gun, no license to run anything, but I pace myself anyway. Within my first few days as a tutor, Alain says to me, "Do you speak Creole? You look like Wyclef." I say, "No." He says, "So you're just like regular black, huh?" Sadly, I say, "Yeah." Funny, but since then I wanted to swallow every Rosetta Stone my stomach could hold, because I really want to help them. They still got flavor, y'all. America's melting pot keeps its seasoning in ESOL classes. And if students are somehow dumb because they struggle with English, then Ludwig van Beethoven is a blibbering idiot. Place dunce hats on Mother Teresa and Gandhi. Does this make sense to you? A million questions interrupt conversations with myself like Mr. Baseball. Why is it called the World Series when you never leave home base? Newsflash, the world is more than New York and LA. Florida and Chicago, will we ever see clearly across the prime meridian, transcend oceans and embrace diversity when she cries at our doorstep, abandoned with no blankets? What happens when you mix Spanish, French, Creole, Vietnamese, and Russian-speaking students in a classroom, 2 bilingual teachers, and give assignments in English? How do you assess them? I'm not mad, just never seen this shade of gray before. And then there's Wycliffe, a Christian-based organization founded by college student Cameron Townsend, whose mission is making God's word available in a language and form that people understand best, specifically indigenous people. The Berrick tribe in Papua New Guinea regard the gallbladder as significant as we see the heart. So John 3:16's "For God so loved the world," in their translation starts off like, "For the world sat well in God's gallbladder. Enlightenment by any means necessary. Send them out, live with natives, learn the language, then translate the Bible. It's a mission impossible process, easier said than done. Spear to neck, sweat bullets, death and salvation are in love, almost inseparable. Many have died for, in essence, becoming ESOL students in places like Papua New Guinea. But crossing the life-threatening line of linguistics is worth the reward. Les langues de Pharaon sont belles. Y no me importa lo que piensan los demás. Heaven is and will always be multicultural. It's gonna look like the most beautiful pack of M&Ms I've ever seen. From ESOL classes east to west to indigenous encounters with Wycliffe, we become connected with shades of gray. Shades of gray is all we'll see when these concrete walls of fear collapse. And out of the ashes rises increasing humility to listen. All right. So there's that. I have another poem that takes a deep dive, sort of look at hands. Initially, it was a commissioned piece for an event that I was supposed to do, and the other person would come up, whatever. But let's take a look at our hands. Ultimately, it's about gratitude. But can you look at your hands? Just play with me for a second. Play with me. All right. Think about all of the things that your hands like do for you throughout the day. You know, some people don't have these, right? And it's just one of those things where we can just kind of use and like overlook. And so I kind of take a deep, kind of introspective look at our hands, and there's some themes and whatever throughout. So just enjoy. It's called Hands of Time. Okay? Here we go. Before TI 83, 4, and 92 calculators, there was the abacus. Colorful rows of wood beads on wood frames for counting. Before that, there were fingers. My favorite. Hopefully still used in preschools. 2 plus 3 is 5. Not rocket science, but visually so easy to conceptualize. Hands are best for math and more. Second grade made us trace these turkeys with natural templates. Thanksgiving's about the familiar, in addition to the creative combination of crayons, construction paper, and 5 fingers. I'm thankful for the basics. Digits were just fine before they went all digital. Seems like the second hand is moving faster than 1 second at a time. Not hating on technology, just remembering the little guys. Writing, texting, and typing require workers. Are they properly recognized? These complex marionettes slow dance with black and white keys to the sound of Ray Charles singing America the Beautiful. From sea to shining sea, acting as a second pair of eyes. Vice president of vision, pay me in ones. I want to feel $500 $1 bills. Can you imagine? 1968 stamped the image of Black Fist raised at the podium. First and third place, John Carlos writes, quote, "You could have heard a frog piss on cotton. There's something awful about hearing 50,000 people go silent. Like being in the eye of a hurricane," end quote. If I could talk to those closed hands, it would say something like, "I did it for basic human rights." Loyal to my cerebral commander-in-chief, used as a symbol of solidarity against our struggles back home. This job ain't easy, but I serve with pride. Hands, preparer of eggplant parmesan, planter of palm trees, pun intended, voices of the deaf, overall doer of dirty work. No wonder the world wants us to wash them so often. Separating conjoined twins at the head takes much more than math. Ask Dr. Ben Carson. They are servants. It's amazing how much can be accomplished if no one cares who gets the credit. America's at its best when it's selfless, when it adopts the personality of phalanges, one of service and strength, tender compassion and defense, a unique identity as a whole with many parts, progressive without forsaking the basics. Embrace it. Founding fathers found out fast they couldn't function solely on firearms. Fingers needed to be interlocked like wheels on a clock. God gave us time, only fitting we give it back. Be a servant. Inspiration is in the basics, so smile when clouds are gray. The best is yet to come. It's about an arm's length away. So I have one more for you. In my journey riding, I know Darla mentioned I did do the open mic and stuff like that. There's a period where you sort of, Pam and I was talking about this earlier, it's more like therapeutic, right? But then there's other people's stories that you can write as well when you've sort of gotten a hang of the craft and delivery, and you know, there's different ways to say things. So this is the story of someone else. Her name is Kim. And it is relative to like our city, so I was thinking of kind of do something that's kind of connected to Orlando, and it may not work with this audience, some of their references, but whatever. This is Orlando, man. The piece is called Orange Blossoms. That's our state flower. Yeah, we share a state flower, right? Yeah. Orange Blossoms, and I'll close with this. It's more of a story than a poem, but enjoy. Orange blossoms are white. Its floral, creamy citrus scent is said to alleviate stress and depression. They blossom alongside oranges, hence the name. Honeybees buzz around the aroma and extract the goods, the symbolism of purity, innocence, and fertility influenced Queen Victoria to rock a wreath of what would become Florida's state flower on her wedding day. Florida, named a state road after that which once wafted of orange blossoms. Time tipped the scale. OBT, the acronym for Orange Blossom Trail. Ironic. The iconic road now known for bodies for sale, but Queen Victoria ain't from Panama City, Florida. She didn't watch her older 6-year-old brother Joshua drown in a pond, helpless, no breathing room to recover when your mother beats you senseless for molestation accusations. He was supposed to be my grandfather. I'm talking about Kim. We sat down on the patio of a Starbucks and she told me everything. How she didn't know there was a hole in her bedroom till she saw one blue eye pierce the drywall, peeping, turn feeling, turn penetration around age 10, the trauma, ghost daddy, zombie mama. When the monster suddenly stopped breathing and dropped in front of her, she didn't dial 911. Because when the grief of death and the scent of freedom cancel each other out, all you can do is stand there, smile, and inhale the lingering allure of orange blossoms. Move in with mama's brother and his wife, but the knife in her soul only deepened and expanded the hole. He was supposed to be my uncle, the trauma, ghost daddy, zombie mama. The rebellion begins. A violent tornado of sin is in the forecast. Door locked in the cellar. Fresh out of jail, Kim, now 17, with a baby from a stranger and a banging body, bumps into a man with a full glass of refreshing language, filled her bowl of anguish. Cadillac Escalades escalated her self-esteem, and she could breathe again. I took another sip of my now lukewarm, customary medium white mocha as the traffic wind washed away our unwashed conversation. She continues. After the 3-week whining and dining was over, he told me we was going on vacation to Tampa in the Carolinas, but I didn't know it was going to be the last time I see my daughter. The stripping and the sexing was all meant to meet his quota, and I ain't making my first time, but he put his hand on my right thigh, said something I ain't never heard before, said, "I'm proud of you." You don't know that dude was a little girl who ain't come from nothing, but they hurt you so bad with cords and fists and body parts and death threats. The list goes on till you brainwash, bleach, clean, and make it as much as me, $3,500 to $5,000 daily for years. But the money just passed from my hand to his. I aspired to be a bottom B, which meant you get to drive your own car. Pick up your own tricks in peace, but honestly, Sean, it wasn't nothing more than an extension on a leash. I was sold 4 more times because this little smart alecky hood mouth of mine, I kept getting in trouble. That last one, he made me stand upside down, hands facing the ground with my feet bracing up against the wall for about an hour till the blood rushed down, dripped up to my forehead. And if my arms got tired or fall, he'll kick me in the face and let the camera roll, put it on YouTube. It was like the man had no soul. Next day, the mother girls were laughing at me. I wanted to go back to jail. It seemed so safe there. My empty Starbucks cup rattled with the whistling of the wind as if to call time out. When will it end? In Miami, in Atlanta, our neighbors to the west, Tampa. She told me her last pimp mistakenly kicked her out of his whip just 30 miles from Panama City, where the first one picked her up from. 7 years in the belly of a fish, spit out onto dry land, baked by the sun. With roads recognizable, all she could do was run. Run for the powerless, run for Joshua. Run. It was a 60-yard dash. Chariot with no horseman, sprint to freedom. Had the tattoo of his name removed to lose the branding, pimps pimping the system in addition to who they deem whores. You see, black men, some black men don't like to be called slave owners. Seems like nobody does these days. Embracing the paradox will lead to lost profits. They hunting for new prospects, idol worship to the penny, and dead presidents. The U.S. Treasury says that Tubman will be the new face on a 20 in 2020 to add to billfolds, but I hate to think of Benjamin's and Harriet's face littering the bottom of strip holes. Maybe it's her way of still rescuing the slaves there. Underground, where Kim once lived. Until now. I retracted the basket woven metal chair from our patio table to part ways, but not before she had a chance to say she reunited with her baby girl. Then 7 with chocolate drop curls, but thoughts still random like Sean. How I explained she was accidentally abandoned. I just want to be a good mom. Never worked on a trail in Orlando, but my heart aches long for them girls there. I love to just like reach out to them and let them know there's hope. Like you can get out, you know? Why else would God leave me alive? Feel like it's part of my calling or something. Better listen to that inner tiger. I'm proud of you, Kim, and all of you other survivors. Rusted shackles break loose at the smell of citrus. The power declare freedom in every state in honor of all of our state flowers. I'm mindful of the transitions, right? All right, so let's see what we have here. Nikisha Elise Williams is an Emmy award-winning news producer and author. She was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. She attended the Florida State University, where she graduated with a BS in Communication, Mass Media Studies, and Honors English Creative Writing. In addition to winning an Emmy, Nikisha also won the Florida Associated Press Broadcasters Award for Best Breaking News in 2014. If you can please help me welcome to the stage, Nikisha Elise Williams.
I'm Nikisha Elise Williams. This is Mylan. My debut novel is called For Women. As the bio said, I'm a news producer. So For Women was kind of born out of that work. I currently work in Jacksonville, and this story started bubbling up around 2013. Here in Orlando, that was the year George Zimmerman went on trial for the murder of Trayvon Martin and was acquitted. In Jacksonville, I was working that night in the control room, and since the state attorney that was prosecuting him was from Jacksonville, I was in the control booth. So the story started there, and then November of 2012, the same year Trayvon was killed, maybe, was that 10 months later? Jordan Davis was killed in Jacksonville over loud music. And so after working both of those cases and more to come, I started to wonder, what do those stories look like from the point of view of African American women? Because in our community, there's a saying that says, you know, black women are always on the front lines for black men, but they never show up for us. And so I wanted to write a story that was all about the black woman's experience, and I wanted to incorporate those themes. And so For Women is just, as it says, about 4 very different women who don't know each other, but whose lives are completely changed by one event, both tragic and triumphant. So let's meet them. Okay, are you gonna get down? Jump down so I can open the book.
Thank you.
Give me, I know. everybody hear me okay, or do I need to lower the mic? Okay. You wanna go watch PJ Masks? Yes or no? No, I'm not going. All right. This is Soleil. She lays on her back, eyes trained to the ceiling, mouth closed, covered, but she can still breathe through her nose. Tears fall from her eyes. They make a flat splash on her white cotton sheets. She cries silently to herself, but remains still, eyes still trained on the ceiling. There she sees a spider. It crawls along the jagged 7-inch crack toward the fan. She concentrates on its 8-leg dance as it creeps along the ceiling, preparing a web of life and insect lies. The cracked, spackled ceiling has slight water stains. The spider creeps closer to the ceiling's fan's spinning blades. Its 8 legs walk in time with the fan's high whine and whir. Red, green, and blue wires hang visible from where the fan was once sturdily mounted. Now those mangled and twisted wires barely hold the weight of the fan in its place. The fan whirs and whines as the blades beat the air around and around. She studies the ceiling fan and she wishes it would fall on his fucking head. And I'll leave Soleil there. I've actually never done the second character in the book in a reading, and that's probably because it's weird to me. As a news producer, I write the words the anchors say, and even though I sit at my desk and I pretend I'm an anchor and say it out loud to make sure that it makes sense, I don't really go in front of the camera to do that. I am the puppet master. So we're gonna try this out. Yes, I'm the voice in their ear. Anytime they do like this, if you watch the news, that's a producer talking to them. So we're gonna try out Dawn. She is the second character in the book, and she is the news anchor. And I'm gonna test my anchor voice on you guys. Across the darkened city, away from the ever-expanding urban sprawl in a nondescript building on the edge of Jacksonville's burgeoning downtown, Dawn Anthony sits poised in front of the camera of the cold studio. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cue Dawn. Welcome back to Dawn in the Evening. In tonight's sound-off, back to the budget, and more specifically, the city's pension problem. City Council needs to find a solution to fix the police and fire pension fund by raising taxes, the retirement age, increasing contributions, something. It also wouldn't hurt to cut unnecessary spending on projects that will never begin, let alone get completed. The budget and the final pension plan should protect the people it affects. Without accounting for all of these issues, the certainty of our city's credit rating and meeting our obligations will remain as certain as unknown as the future of Detroit. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Dawn in the Evening. As always, we'd like to thank our special guest, economist Brian Michael White, and local author and activist Shelby Lincoln. Thank you to you both, and to you at home. I'm Dawn Anthony, and we hope to see you right here tomorrow night for Dawn in the Evening. Clear Dawn, John, the floor director, yells in a burly voice. John, I'm leaving my mic on the desk, Dawn says, the anchor and managing editor of Dawn in the Evening. Dawn, keep the mic. We need to shoot 3 promos for tomorrow night before you head out, John says. Are we doing them in here, in the studio, or in the newsroom? Ask Kelly. John wrangles the robotic cameras together. Is Kelly still on headset? No, Dawn, I'm behind you. Kelly, the producer says as she approaches Dawn at the anchor desk. Did you write the promos for tomorrow? Yes, they should be behind your sound-off script. Dawn rifles through her pink paper scripts until she finds the 3 pages she's looking for. She puts on her black square-rimmed glasses to read through the copy, pen in hand. At 35, she is the only woman in the Jacksonville, Florida market to anchor an hour-long news magazine show 5 nights a week, covering local, national, and international politics, policies, and crises. The show steals viewers from the primetime lineup on the broadcast networks and rivals the cable networks for ratings in the 8 o'clock hour. 1 script in, and I already see a problem, Dawn says, marking through her scripts. Yes, Dawn? Kelly responds. I know the budget and the pension thing is big, but I really don't want to promo that. We talk about it almost every day. It's news. It's a given. Is there something sexier we can lead with? We've got the pension and the budget, the Marine that just returned home from working in Australia and found his wife cleaned him out and that their marriage wasn't even real, and then the update on Governor Rick Scott's push to drug test welfare recipients. Kelly, I like the Marine story for the emotion and the governor drug testing thing for the outrage factor, though at this point, it's just inside baseball. We don't have anything else we know we're going to talk about tomorrow besides the budget and pension. No, the news hasn't happened yet. You don't say. Then I guess we'll just shoot 2 promos, but you have to do 3, Boyce Butler, WABN's news director, says as he steps into the brightly lit set. Boyce, I understand that, but as my producer has just informed me, the news hasn't happened yet, and I'm not teasing this budget bullshit one more night. It was known around the 9 News Now newsroom that Boyce and Dawn hated each other. They tried to respect one another to keep peace, but friendly they were not. Dawn made a decision, and Boyce vetoed it, pulling rank as the news director. Boyce made a decision, and Dawn threatened to break her contract and take Dawn in the Evening, which she owned the creative and editorial rights over, to rival station WNNB. This rift over a promo was going to explode, and the Dawn in the Evening crew knew to steer clear. Pale, burly John and Kelly, who sported a near orange spray tan and I Love Lucy red hair, backed slowly across the set. They slipped silently into the weather office at the back of the studio. Through the office's frosted window, they watched as brown-eyed, licorice-skinned Dawn looked into the ruddy, freckled face of Boyce. He feigns nicety. Dawn, you can't just decide you're not going to shoot 3 promos because you don't like the content. Yes, I can. It's my show, my name, my promo, she says, brushing her medium-length jet black hair from her face. Your show, my station, my rules. You're right, your rules. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to shoot 2 of the 3 promos for my show. Then we'll have Taryn Tyler shoot the last promo for her story on the Marine that's airing in my show. That work for you, Mr. Butler? Dawn smiles, but it doesn't touch her eyes. Yes, Dawn, I can always count on you to take care of your responsibilities. Great, Kelly, let's get these things shot so I can go. Sure, Kelly stutters, stumbling out of the weather office. So, in a newsroom, scenes like that happen all the time, probably with a lot more cursing. And a lot less resolved so quickly. So it was kind of fun to write some of the news scenes because some of them have actually happened in some way or another. And many friends in Jacksonville, if you watch the news, have asked me if the character Dawn Anthony is based on the actual anchor Dawn Lopez. The answer is no. I actually started writing the novel before I worked at my current station where Dawn is the morning anchor. And I think when I finished the book and I really literally wrote the last word, I was like, everybody's gonna think it's her. And I was like, well, here we go. Luckily, she and I are really good friends, so she didn't mind. And she was like, are you sure it's not me? I'm like, I promise, it's not about you. So that is Dawn Anthony. The second character is Johnny, and her struggle, I think, is one we may all be able to relate to in some way. And here we go. For Dr. Jonelle Johnny Edwards, the grocery store after 5 p.m. on a Thursday is the second worst place to be in the world on a Thursday after 5 p.m. The first worst place being the Shands Emergency Center operating room, the former name of the hospital before the University of Florida decided to assert all of its monetary authority with the eponymous UF Health. That's the worst place to be in the world on any day. Johnny found herself able to leave early, if you call stopping at 36 hours instead of going for the full 48, leaving early. The week had been one shooting victim after another. Some victims were women and children. Most of them were men. If they made it to the operating room, the majority of them lived. Johnny praised God for her quick, nimble fingers, but sometimes victims died. A regrettable feeling she let worm its way inside her heart until she was standing in the grocery store after 5 p.m. on a Thursday, looking for something quick and effective to erase the memory of the face who died on her table 2 hours ago. Johnny plans to drink away her failure today, and again after her victim's funeral, a ritual she began when she lost her first patient 2 years ago, 2 years after her residency. Maneuvering the grocery side of one of the world's largest discount retailers, Johnny finds herself facing the back racks of cheap wine and no spirits. She desperately searches for a $12 bottle of anything, hoping the higher price will mean better quality. But the shelves filled with $9 bottle after $9 bottle force her to settle on Behringer's White Zinfandel, deciding, you don't have to be fancy to be drunk. Wine bottle in hand, Johnny pushes her way to the front of the store where she stands in the long line for people with 20 items or less. reminded once again why she hates the grocery store on a Thursday after 5 p.m. 18 cash registers man the front of the store. Only 6 are open, not including the chaos of the self-checkout square. Johnny waits, tapping her feet, crossing and recrossing her arms. She sighs loudly, clears her throat, and stares down the cashier's daring her to say anything other than, "May I help you?" The line crawls until finally Johnny is able to set the wine bottle down on the conveyor belt. She brings her hands to her temples and massages her head, regretting not picking up the bottle of aspirin from the pharmacy when she had the chance. Stretching her neck to each side, muscles and tendons crack, forcing herself to relax. Johnny scans the racks of magazines. Paper tabloids that make no bones about what they are stand next to glossy tabloids putting on airs as respectable publications. They are all the same, telling the same story from cover to cover. One fat pop star, one skinny celebutante. A picture of a post-pregnancy wedding planning Kim Kardashian on every cover, even if she isn't the cover story. None of the pictures are new. Stock photos plaster the covers of the tabloids, all of them old and outdated. The only thing separating one from another are their headlines, each one more sensational than the last. Johnny roves across the magazines stacked high on the display shelves until her eyes fall to the candy crates where children can easily reach and beg their tired parents for a sugar high. "Will this be all for you today, ma'am?" the cashier asks dryly. "No," Johnny says. "Add these 2. She places 4 cans of Altoids on the sliding conveyor belt, thinking, "I need to restock anyway." That is Johnny. So the book is set up into 3 different parts. In part 1, you meet all the women. In part 2, that one event that connects them all happens. And then part 3 is almost the resolution of the drama. I say almost because Darlin has read the book, and as many readers, she got mad at me for the ending, but it's okay because I finished the sequel and it will be out in August. So, do I have time for one more? That's it? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Gilmore teaches literature and writing at Florida State College at Jacksonville, where he was awarded a 2018 Distinguished Faculty Award. The Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville named Gilmore the 2018 Literary Artist of the Year. Also in 2018, Gilmore served on the Jacksonville City Council's Civil Rights History Task Force. He holds a PhD in English from the University of Florida. Gilmore is the author of 16 books, including the historical novel about the founder of Jacksonville, The Book of Isaiah, a vision of the founder of a city, illustrated by his colleague Shep Shepard, and creative nonfiction such as The Devil in the Baptist Church, Bob Gray's Unholy Trinity, In Search of Eartha White, Storehouse for the People, The Mad Atlas of Virginia King, and Stalking Otis Toole, A Southern Gothic. Gilmore adapted Stalking Otis Toole as a play with FSCJ DramaWorks' Ken McCullough, directed at the school's Wilson Center in spring 2017. Gilmore is the founder of Jacks by Jex, a literary arts festival built on the theme of Jacksonville writers writing Jacksonville. His poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction have appeared in more than 40 publications. His website, jackpsychogeo.com, contains around 400 stories of different Jacksonville locations. Please welcome Tim Gilmore.
Hey, folks. Thanks. I was thinking about what to read, and I thought, we're at the Timucua White House, that I might read something from my website, Jack Psycho Geo, about a Timucuan burial mound in the Jacksonville area. I'm not going to read it, so I'm just going to briefly tell you that you should look it up and read it because it's really interesting. They're called long-nosed god maskettes. These little tiny faces were found there that match an Indian deity from Cahokia in the middle of the country called He Who Wears Human Heads as Earrings. So there's some pretty interesting Timucua stuff in the Jacksonville area. What I am going to read to you is the start of something that's going to be out in the fall. I'm especially excited to read this in front of you because it's about a hermit, and that will make sense, I think, in a little bit. These are both, what I'm going to read to you are pieces of creative nonfiction. I love to delve into the Jacksonville area's weird characters, and there are tons of them, and they are very weird. This one is going to be called Goat Island Hermit, the State of Florida versus Rollins Christopher. And I think this explains itself, and then I'm going to read to you the very end of Stalking Otis Toole, A Southern Gothic, and I think that will explain itself too. These were both real people. It's been fun to dig into them. Death in your home by poison gas. Awaited Judge A.D. McNeil if he refused to rescind his order for Rollins Christopher to vacate Goat Island and take his 1,000 goats, his horses, and his dogs and chickens with him. McNeil received the threatening letter 9 months after Rollins agreed in February 1955 to leave his 1,300-acre island home of 17 or 18 years. He still hadn't left. He'd lived on Goat Island most of his adult life, though where he'd come from nobody knew. It wasn't Rollins who made the threat. An 85-year-old former machinist named W.T. French had mailed the letter from Tampa, where he was subsequently arrested. He'd read of the Florida Ship Canal Authority's case against the hermit and had taken his side, believing Rollins Christopher, quote, a very near relative of the Osceola tribe of Indians, from whom Goat Island was stolen by, quote, Spanish murderous pirates. French had signed his letter war counsel for the Osceola, Seminole, and Cherokee tribe of Indians. It's hardly worth mentioning there was never an Osceola tribe, nor any such war council, nor anyone but W.T. French who was willing to go to war for Rollins Christopher. Goat Island is going to lose its only resident and its goats. So begins the Associated Press story, February 1955. Rollins Christopher said he wanted only to live in a wild place, and since the midst of the Great Depression he had done so. What grudge could anyone hold against him? Christopher had made his home in the St. Johns River in its undeveloped wilderness between downtown Jacksonville and the river's exodus into the Atlantic Ocean. The St. Johns flows northward from marshland just northeast of Lake Okeechobee in central Florida, 310 miles past Orlando and Ocala, winds through Jacksonville, becomes the city's fluid spine, and courses mightily into the Atlantic. Though the state sought to evict Rollins Christopher from his wild island home, according to Rear Admiral R. Malcolm Fortson, managing director of the Florida Ship Canal Authority, it had, quote, no immediate plans for the island. Rollins needed to leave because the state hoped eventually to develop the alluvial bogs and sand flats and swirling eddies and shifting shoals that constituted Goat Island into barge terminals. The Canal Authority hoped to cut a shipping channel across the state that would rival the greatness even of the Panama Canal. One day, it didn't know when, but Rollins had until June 15th. On July 1st, the Associated Press reported the squatter of Goat Island is still there. His previous agreement to comply with an eviction notice, he now said, was a misunderstanding. He'd misconstrued the release he'd signed for a lease. He'd never had to sign one line on any paper before. The island was home, and home made it his. Any less sensible law must surely be unlawful, whether recognized or not by some judge somewhere. So Rollins requested the authorities set aside his June 15th eviction date, and a hearing was scheduled for the 19th. In the meantime, he walked his dogs and his goats and fed his chickens and tended to the workings of the island. He was a fastidious and prideful wild man, dapper amidst the cabbage palms, treading cleanly dressed and well-spoken among the rattlesnakes, an ethnically unidentifiable swamp cracker who stuck to himself and tended his island and herded his goats. The Florida Ship Canal Authority had gone to court to remove him from the very earth that had produced him. His strength and identity accrued from the earth and the river, while theirs snuck and sidled through legal definitions and abstract rules of possession. Rollins Christopher never paid a dime for his life on Goat Island, but the landscape exacted its own price. The land in these waters alloys itself in the waters in this land. The island simmers, swamp but desert. Opposites conjoin and remain apart. Male rattlesnakes rise tall and wind upward in the boiling sand, batting their long and soft armored bodies in a dance of heights for the prize of sex. Beneath the flat, hard spikes of palmetto fronds in the scorching sand, 13 garter snakes coalesce into a mating ball. They writhe together and against one another, tips of leathery tails trembling against the trembling spikes of dead weeds and other tails. The 13 snakes could be one snake, coiled and tangled about itself in frenzy, if not for the many heads that emerge from and disappear back into the mass. One of the 12 males will penetrate the fecund female snake twisted up in the writhing. And if this sight's not a vision of hell, perhaps it's hell when hungry, hard-scrabbled children set these snakes on fire to bring the roasted orgy home for dinner. Occasionally, dead foliage combusts into flames spontaneously on the driest hot beaches of the swamp and muck. Sometimes the rib of an old steamboat or shrimper, the femur of some lost fisherman, or the serrated bill of a sawfish washes into the tidal flats of mud and sand. At times, a lone boy or old woman will see some amphibious vulpine devil, strange and nightmarish, come up through the salt of the water of the land, a beast that no one before had seen. Nor is the wild impressed with human recognition, because it cannot be a murderer. What's wild has the right to kill. Perhaps no one whose mind is right could want this watery sand land, but there are people who most want to have to themselves the earth where no one can interfere with their solitude and self-determination. They want only the right to live life on this planet. That's all, nothing else. For such people, the place most uninhabitable becomes paradise. They gain a wildness not possible for the rest of us, a kinship with wilderness. If it's not too obsequiously romantic, such men and women are perhaps closer to whom, to what most people who've ever lived have been for millennia before literacy and cities in the wild earth. Such people are half as wild as the snake mating ball, the mosquito, the black-legged tick, the jagged red teeth of the saw palmetto. Such people want only to be left alone. Rollins Christopher wanted only to live the life into which he'd been born in the wilderness that so brutally and unquestioningly received him. I'm going to read to you the very end of this book about Otis Toole. If you remember hearing anything about Otis Toole, what you've heard may or may not be true. You should buy the book and make up your own mind. I should say real quickly for Orlando folks, Springfield is this Victorian neighborhood just north of downtown that is now in much better shape than it was when Otis Toole lived there and set a bunch of buildings on fire. So the way Springfield is represented here is not the way it is today. I think Springfield residents would probably want me to say that. In an October 23rd, 1983 story in the Miami Herald, journalist John McCormick found the Springfield residents who knew Otis. The Springfield residents long dispersed by the time Will started mapping Otis across the city 3 decades later. The article begins, for most of his life, the rotting core of the Springfield neighborhood confined Otis Elwood Toole's world. The article quotes Betty Goodyear, "Mom, that's what he always called me. I felt he was kind of lost, and he took to me. I knew him since he was 7 or 8, I guess. He might not have been what you'd call on top, but he was stable." Betty said he could say things like, if he didn't like someone, I'll just kill him and throw him in an old house and set it on fire, but I didn't pay it any mind. I thought it was just talk. The change came when Henry Lee Lucas came to town, Betty said. But if she didn't believe Otis when he threatened to kill people, she did seem to know about his arsons. He said Lucas knew about a lot of fires and things, and after he'd seen Lucas kill a couple of people, he was afraid of him. The article quoted an anonymous police officer who worked Springfield. I've had numerous run-ins with him, and there was nothing remarkable about him. He's not like Charles Manson. You could see that Manson was crazy. Otis didn't come off that way. He fit into the neighborhood. In Otis's May 1984 arson murder trial, psychiatrist Eduardo Sanchez said Otis, quote, functions on a very primitive level, almost like a child. He's very impulsive. He's at the mercy of his own impulses most of the time. Sanchez further testified that Otis was, quote, capable of loving, saying he loved his mother quite dearly, and he loved Miss Betty Goodyear, and he loved Henry Lucas. Nevertheless, due to Otis's childish impulses, quote, at the same time, he is quite capable of killing someone. Psychologist Susanna Urbina called Otis, quote, borderline retarded and dependent on others for their approval. If Otis never learned anything else, he learned to supply what people wanted of him. If Otis was good at nothing else, he was adept at picking up those cues. Otis would become anyone you asked him to be, whether you knew what you'd asked of him or not. Otis knew. Vernon called his brother Otis a, quote, mama's baby, who had always been reclusive and strange. Vernon said Otis suffered from spells at times and had to be held down. He said Otis hid off by himself. He wouldn't have nothing to do with nobody. But Vernon said that no matter what anybody else did to Otis, he wasn't ever violent. He wouldn't protect himself. He'd run from somebody instead of fight. In McCormick's 1983 story, Springfield boarding house resident Dwayne Purvis said, 80% of the people around here are on mental disability. You just sit here on the porch and watch the comic strip go by. But Dwayne's wife, Catherine Purvis, said, Otis used to clean here. I never saw anyone so clean. He was very good to me. I'm an invalid, you know. If I fell, Otis would pick me up. He was kind that way. Otis Toole was a good, kind man. Newspapers say that you and Henry Lucas are responsible for close to 700 murders. What do you have to say about that? Otis, shoulders slumped forward, smiles, the big toothless smile, says, I ain't even done one. How I'm going to do 700? Then Otis saying, I got put in jail for burning down a couple buildings. You're what they call, well, you used the word before. Otis closing his eyes, smiling, a big rictus, then looking back at his interviewer saying, powerful maniac. A powerful maniac, the interviewer says, amused. Then he corrects him. You mean a pyromaniac? Being asked about cannibalism and necrophilia made Otis laugh. We threw in the filth, he said. Filth is what makes the books sell. They say I eat people, that I fuck the dead. Otis had played everybody, so much for everybody calling him stupid. If Otis was stupid, a lot of powerful people turned out to be more stupid by far. We was carrying all of them on a wild goose chase, seeing how much money we could get them to spend on it in all the states. You guys did play with the system, the journalist said. We had the whole United States in an uproar, Otis said. It was the biggest uproar in history. The interviewer points out the scars on Otis's hands and asks about them. Otis says those are the places where he held lit cigarettes on his skin to burn himself. And the interviewer asking, what would you do if you got out of jail, Otis? And Otis saying, go right back to Jacksonville. And do what, Otis? Otis saying simply, get me a job. You give up the torch, huh? And Otis's toothless mouth smiling wide and big and happy. Otis saying slowly, sweetly, innocently, ain't gonna say I wouldn't burn down no more buildings, you know. All right. Oh, good. Andres Rojas has an MFA from the University of Florida, is the author of the audio chat book, The Season of the Dead, which doesn't say this, but I'm proud that I got to write some liner notes for that, from Eat Poems 2016. His poetry has been featured in Best New Poets 2017 and has most recently appeared or is forthcoming in, among others, I always ask you this, is it Agni or is it AG&I? It is Agni? Okay. Barrow Street, Colorado Review, Massachusetts Review, Mid-American Review, New American Writing, New England Review, Notre Dame Review, and Poetry Northwest. He is the current poetry editor at Compose and blogs about writing at toppoet.com. I think there's a missing letter there because it's poet backwards and then forwards, right? All right, Andy Rojas.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you, Darlene and Brad, for bringing me along for the ride. I have short poems. They go by pretty fast. This first one is called When the Bad News I Get Could Be Worse, which is almost always the case. And it's not a funny poem, even though the title is funny. When the bad news I get could be worse, which is almost always the case. I think of those handcuffed on a bus to the border, of those cut or burned or held down or worse, those who have lost a daughter or a son to a mistake, and those minutes from breathing no more, but still breathing. This one's On a Line by Amiri Baraka. The line is, things have come to that. On a Line by Amiri Baraka. You at the table. A window testifies to a dark morning's world. I make myself thankful we're not in chains or behind barbed wire. Things have come to that. I make myself thankful for your face hallowed in my hands. I drive you to school again, one last time, not knowing that yet. Right. Sometimes my wife works at the University of North Florida. Sometimes I drive her there, and that's like always in your mind, right? And if you have kids, of course. This one's a poem. I think it would become obvious if you read it, but you're not going to get a chance to reread it. So basically, recently my cousin Ed and his wife, she was pregnant and she had a miscarriage on the 6th month. And Melinda, my wife, she had 2 miscarriages in the first trimester. So this poem is sort of about that. And it's called Then. And I was talking to her about this. Then, to me, is an interesting word because it talks, then is like back then we were in Jacksonville. But it also marks a starting, and then things changed. So it's like an interesting word, like as things are and then as they change. Then, before we would trade our life for any other, because it wasn't ours. So much Lysol on the hallways, I could no longer smell it. By your bedside, canna lilies on a jar. I saw the spaces. Or when someone rejoices and thinks you're in the ward to rejoice too. With effort, a place can be found. Photo album, shelf, garage, ground. When they wheeled you back, I inhaled your scent more than any bargain. Our neighbor rocked forward and back as I told her, pregnant with pause. Let's see. I think I'm just going to read one more. These are kind of long. This one's called. This one's called In the Dark Times. And of course, it makes reference to Bertolt Brecht's poem In the Dark Times. In the dark times, will there be singing? Yes, there will be singing about the dark times. In the dark times. I fix a coat from air to warm my fear. Except tomorrow will be full of cracks and their attendant gusts. The roof over my life may be past repair. I buy a stranger a burger, hand another paper money. No, they'll both stomach hunger again. I wait for words sent out like crows to return, even if soaked, wings like broken branches. I drop each of my days like a breadcrumb. I won't walk this way again. My days line up like inmates and clap hands. They clap hands for me, and I sing. Hey, oh my goodness. I am going to mispronounce that last name. I'm not a native speaker. Todd Cavaness? Todd Cavaness is the impresario of Speakeasy and Loose Lips, the inventor of Fringe's Poetry Vending Machine, and the Orlando Sentinel's wingman, justifying your hangover since 2013. We are not worth.
Hey guys. It's been too long, you guys. Oh wow. So my name is Todd, and I'm also a member of the doing a literary reading while holding a toddler club. So solidarity to Sean and Nikisha. I always think like Neruda and Bukowski and Anis Mujani. Yeah, they're pretty hot shit, but could they do it while a human being is urinating on their hip? I don't think so. He might. Bukowski actually urinated. He just eliminated the middleman.
I was just going to point out to you that that's not a toddler.
That's not a toddler. No, but he's got to get a crutch. All right, so I was going to. I'm always intimidated by this place, and I poured over some things to read that had a nice theme, and then I went. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I'm just gonna read whatever the fuck I want, and curse indiscriminately. Also, this is called Run Boy Run. There ain't so many who believe nowadays, and them that do, they ask me, would I take that bet again? Like they was never 17 before. Now, I've been down the road a mile or two since then, and when I get back down up Georgia way, it ain't Dixie no more. You go up to the holler, you got your young'uns smoking that brimstone. Skirts up, breeches down, and no treble at all in the love songs. They just thumping away. Scratching each other's names in that hickory stump like a contract. Come morning, I don't see no cherry southern sunrise outside that window so much as fire on the mountain. Then my vision ain't so good. Hindsight works just fine, though. Y'all take it from an old hand, still got a little twist in the wrist. A fiddle, she ain't happy unless she's crying. And she's gonna do it, whether you work that bow like a switch or a pen, making you sweet little porcelain promises. And guess which kind the devil prefers? Yeah, rock and roll heaven in my ass. Ain't no guitar slinger or honky-tonk honey I know looking for a joyful noise unless it's a moan up close by their ears. So don't pay no mind to the folk tale. Devil don't run no casino. And a soul ain't a poker chip. I told that son of a bitch I was the best that's ever been. He said, damn straight, Johnny. Don't ever let no bitch tell you otherwise. You know, I never did sell that fiddle. Damned if I know why. Once every month or so, one of my exes bring the kids around, and I break it out now and again if they get to pestering. I don't know what they expect. The thing don't play for shit. Draw the bow across, the sound just hits them golden walls and drops, dead and forgot. Whatever racket come out of that thing is worse than tears. I watch him blink and stutter, and I tell him what my daddy told me. A real fiddle? It takes a little sacrifice. Go on out to the woods, find yourself a big old oak, hollow it out, carve a woman's curve into the heart, gut a lamb and stretch it tight across. You practice good. Don't you worry none about your fortune or fame. Take it on out there, serenade that dead stump. Let the trees cry their leaves. Somebody bound to come along. Charlie Daniels fans in the house. Awesome. All right. Cool. So yeah, it's a little bit trip down memory lane, I guess. This is about the very first job that I had when I came to Orlando, and I have had really good luck with jobs, apart from anybody who was dating me, and relied on me to pay for things. But this was still the best job I'll ever have. This is called Night Job. Greetings, travelers, and welcome to Terror on Church Street. Your journey is about to begin. If you hope to survive, listen closely. Within these walls, we have 4 simple rules. 1, you will notice it is very dim inside. They like it that way. Lighters, flashlights, lights of any kind are forbidden. They won't help you find us, and they'll only make it easier for us to find you. My first job in the city was a year-round haunted house, back in the days when you could still pull that off downtown. $7 an hour, 20 hours a week, and no insurance, despite the fact that you were paid to jump out in front of macho Brazilian tourists and let them take a swing at you. Sometimes you ducked, sometimes you didn't, and you watched their girlfriends squeal and sway into the darkness, calling her over their shoulder, "I love you, Freddy Krueger!" 7 years in community theater, playing every virgin pussy in the Neil Simon catalog, and now this. 2, no photography or videotaping will be permitted inside the attraction. The horrors within are for your eyes only. For my orientation, they locked me in a cage on the 2nd floor and told me to scream for help. No one ever helped. Mom and Dad would point and laugh, and their 9-year-old kids would spit on me. And while they were doing that, Gary would rise up behind them, quiet as a butterfly on 10-inch platform boots, blood streaming down his face from the spikes of broken glass, get within whispering distance, and roar! The sight of a happy family pinballing off the walls, mother cursing into father's ear, little sister screaming, "I want to go home." This is how the barber feels when he hands back the mirror and sees us smile. Mostly we were not actors. Stoners, makeup artists, college sophomores, goths who could actually pull off the look, stoners. We played cards between groups, fooled around on the exorcist bed, and knew all the secret places to smoke. Tish, the gift shop girl, would bring her 4-year-old daughter upstairs on breaks to bounce on Hannibal Lecter's knee, while Dracula taught her jive handshakes. Sometimes I wonder what kind of monsters were under her bed, or if she had any at all. 3. Once inside the attraction, do not stop. You're a sitting duck. Do not run. We will catch you. Don't turn back. You won't make it. We made it 8 years. On the last night, the gift shop was filled with off-the-clock zombies hugging the vampires, scarecrows exchanging knowing glances with the gargoyles. Michelle spent an hour on her evil clown makeup, and by 8 o'clock you could see her blushing cheeks in tunnels of tears through the grease paint. She had never looked more terrifying. At the ticket booth, people paid their $10, asked what was inside, and we told them the future one last time. Here's the deal, we said. You are going to die. On the way, there will be surprises. Enjoy them. Those are what you pay for. In the meantime, hold on tight to each other and try not to hurt anybody. That's our job. At 1 a.m., the psycho revved up his chainsaw and chased the final group out into the street, the girls hugging their boys for dear, dear life. We locked the doors behind them and sang karaoke in the graveyard. 4. Do not let fear or curiosity get the better of you. Do not touch anyone or anything you see, and they will not touch you. They tore down the place a long time ago and put up a restaurant complex under 20 stories of office space with a parking garage more complicated than any maze we ever had. People in seasonal ties or sensible heels can grab a coffee downstairs and scurry on up for the 10 o'clock. I look up there, and I'll joke about putting on some zombie makeup one day, finding a nice bathroom stall to hole up in. See how many casual Friday dockers I can brown out. I wonder if they scare easy up there, or if they scare like most of us, walking around like the moment before the horror movie violins kick in, missing those days when they knew the boogeyman was real, but they knew where he lived. Do they look out from the corner office down at the street and wonder if they finally got away from him, way up here? I wonder if they know it's haunted. And as far as I know, Darlin is the only one that ever complimented this poem, especially at a time when I was just looking for reasons to cuss, including my sister, but she's got an excuse. She actually hasn't heard this one. But this is called Insulating a Gingerbread House. She is 5 and a half. And I lie to my little sister like a younger brother would have pulled on pigtails, keeping her magic carpet airborne, her eyes wide as Christmas, staring at a crack in the bedroom wall. A leprechaun lives there, right behind the light switch. A ragged gypsy in G.I. Joe boots and a faded green vest comes out occasionally to collect a stray red hair from her pillow, uses them to knit hammocks or lasso cockroaches. His name is Alexander, which I know because I am older and smarter. No, he doesn't have any gold. You see, it's like Dad says, the immigration was difficult for the Irish, but he earns his keep, kills the odd spider or bed bug, and besides, he likes a good jig. Prefers my Led Zeppelin to her Debbie Gibson, but Jodi's walls are thicker and sturdier than mine, just like her hair. He also likes has X-ray vision and casually dates the Tooth Fairy because sometimes you just can't leave a good story alone, especially with Jodi. The Truth has always been a vicious nanny to her. Kicks over her couch-cushioned fortresses with news of an early bedtime and a divorce. She dances around like a sidewalk crack. 10 years down the road, the Truth will mean the cheerleading squad is too good for her. But the boys who drink her tears like Jaeger shots will watch her splits and tell her, baby, them bitches is just jealous, and that's the truth. Then, as now, she rushes to exile in the quilted Narnia of her bedroom, kicks open the gate so hard the doorknob cracks the plaster. She coils up, peers at it with Kilroy eyes over the battlements of her knees, and I can tell I've gone a couple of happy endings too far. The truth is, Alexander would join your tea party, but allergies make him itchy, and frankly, your pastry tastes like a potholder. The truth is, he's never been much of a talker anyway. See, where he comes from, nobody cares about the rainbow, only where it ends, so you can see where it might get a little bit awkward. She watches my poker face die like a firefly in a jar, and she asks me, maybe he would like to drive her Barbie Corvette instead. It would be okay if he asked permission. Somewhere past bedtime, her mother is calling with a voice raw from other battles, and I throw her a pillow, say, don't be a dumbass. Your Barbie Corvette is plastic. And she pouts, but she's laughing, because we both know it's just too good to be true. But Jody and I, we've never been underachievers. Thank you. Right, 3 left. All right. It's a short one, lovely. Matt, I'll see. I'm gonna go with gusto here on the pronunciation. Matt Laney, not enough laughter, that's good. Who teaches at FSCJ, will read from A Violet Abominatio, a book of poetry detailing the finer words of A Violet. By accident, Matt came across Violet, a homeless drifter living in Jennings, Louisiana, in a crude lean-to on land belonging to Matt's father-in-law. On the day prior to Hurricane Rita's landfall, an elderly Violet spoke eloquently of his life and its looming end. Some of his claims have loosely panned out, but most remain unverifiable. Did he commit a multiple murder outside Omaha? Had his mother been an actual pirate? What of Violet's time in a Dallas subdivision, and did he really help build the Bates home, as seen in Hitchcock's Psycho? I have got to hear this. After Rita passed, Violet was gone, the swamp on which he lived, having been swamped by flood and vicious wind. Give it up for Matt Laney, everybody.
So A Violet, he was an eloquent drifter, mass murderer, maybe both. He was born in Nebraska, after which he drifted to the New Mexico desert. He was there for the first atom bomb explosion in 1945, train hopped to Los Angeles, where he did work on the set of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. He fled Los Angeles north, eventually ended up living along the rugged coastline in British Columbia, where he met Michael Bigg, who, if you know anything about killer whale research, Michael Bigg was very important in regards to that. Eventually, forest fire sent Violet south again, where he ended up in Dallas. He married for a short time, and then ended finally in Louisiana, where I met him the day before Hurricane Rita hit the coastline. But I'm going to read a little section from Los Angeles. And so this is right around the time of the filming of Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, so 1959, 1960. And the only thing you really need to know at this point is just in the days previous to this, Violet killed a hobo on the train that he hopped into Los Angeles and stole his clothes, Western wear, cowboy hat. And so this is Violet's voice. And by the way, just because of the way Violet spoke, I chose to write the book in stanza form, not in prose. To happen upon Los Angeles on Halloween at that moment, when measured on the ruler of my life, was disorienting. In a knee-jerk how this was city dwellers' regular garb, everyday costuming to foment gay celebration. And hell, why not if you got time and funding? Sure, I put two with too soon a while, but that does make me silly and smiley remembering that one, of all the naivety I've done. Ironic that sunset had just finished, since I'd been woven into parading on a street named Sunset Boulevard, wild in a manner new to me. This nebulous party crew smoking scrub weed and imbibing jugs of circulated wine consumed my orbit, and this gal just as a spider threw a limb on my shoulder and said, "Come with us, cowboy." Couldn't tell if her eyes were menacing because of face paint or herself. I counted 6 legs plus 2 arms. It was semi-accurate at least, so I shrugged and joined up. Never did I let liquor or smoke invade me. I'd seen ruin consume bodies like fruit gone rotten, watched loads guzzled by nincompoops about the boxcars, hours of bottle tipping amidst a haze of self-swallowing rent. What I disliked most was the loud man it could bring, who'd blare, spiraling like he'd grown new muscles or a callus, covering his doubts, like he wasn't who he was. So there's that. And the few times I'd have taken a snort when I'd thought fine of one, I'd been cornered by the general populace with whom I cohabitated, a ravenous group of degenerates or probable degenerates halved by harmless dregs, and I'd abstain for protective reasons. Well, there in California, on that strange felt night, trudging up a screwy hill crowded with grandiose mansions, ghosts and gravestones scattered in sad mimicry of the real macabre, I knew these flighty people weren't capable of harm. And I'd learned also there wasn't no loud man in me. "Aren't you pretty?" this dandy, wearing a feather scarf, said. To me, I figured later, beside the swimming pool, shaped like a hindquarter. Mesmerized by the scene of turquoise and slick frolic, empty laughs and tinseled splashing, I sipped again from the tall cup handed me after the gate, which been buttressed by identical lions set on rectangular bases, a decor decision I believed made lions less impressive. "Leave him alone, Gary." The spider showed up, shoved Gary, then, as in a theatrical, grabbed his feathers and roiled her tongue in his mouth like a bagged eel. Gary left for booze, and Spider said, "Having fun?" The direct tone made clear her intent on something deeper. Though soused and content, I'd stayed sober enough for subtle readings. "You like Gary?" My question to her question. "Not really." "Then why you kiss him like you did? You only kiss people you like?" "Sure." I lied about having kissed. "Would you kiss me?" She leaned in, fingered my collar, then looked for what she wanted from my eyes. I'd watched fear come before, the recognition. Hers settled slow, from having never seen the second shadow, the one adjoined to her own, always there and with enough salt in its gums to mark a person-like territory. "You're real," she said, gasping. I watched her gaze travel the glacial lines in my face, inhale the drifter smell, grasping I was no shop display cowboy. "You're real too," I said. She stepped back. "Don't disappear, Spider, then you won't be real." Breathing had become troubling for her. "No one here is," she said. Turned, she hurried away. A scarehouse visit supposed to be fun but gone chilly. What happens when an invisible front finally reaches where you've been this whole time? The sudden air sharp and still with danger, explaining how air can, that the scarehouse ain't in control of itself, and, per a same accord, controls you, not the illusion carried around in a bag so insignificant it couldn't even hold the weight of yourself. It was getting late, and this was the first I'd felt and ever would feel anything approaching vanity. "Can you lift and carry?" shaking on my shoulder, a bearded man's large face. My groggy answer was slurred, but formed well enough a confirmation. "Good, 10 minutes and more vamos. Pays $50 for a day's work." He left, and I took stock. 1, this be more money I'd ever earned. 2, I'd slept on a pool lounger beneath a thriving willow. And 3, An Asian housemaid was clearing party mess from the glass tableware. Her onyx hair, pulled taut, was black as her uniform. I conjectured if she had strength enough to lift me. Might have. When time came to leave, I said, "Ma'am," and tipped my hat. The maid bowed in reply with striking formality, and that, I thought, was the best gesture ever shown to me. Most of the day I spent pushing gear from here to there, unpacking, setting up, breaking down, repeat. Roller cameras were the size of luggage crates I'd hauled in Nebraska and had lenses large enough for Krakens. I'd heard of movies, so it wasn't like magic to a primate tribesman who'd never seen ice, and I caught on, always did when it meant connecting equipment to a concept. This was art, but in my few exposures to creative paint or pen, I'd never been one to proselytize against its worth or tease the creators like some sapheads I'd met. So I enjoyed that day on set, preparing a moment, film rolling, a scene unfolded like a dinner napkin placed on a lap. From my gathering, the story followed Norman, who killed anyone stopping by the family motel in Homestead. His dead mother still screamed in his head sometimes, which sent him dressing in mother's old dress and a gray wig to stalk victims. A real yarn and hoot. Director Hitchcock was a man of precise idea whose demands didn't yield no matter complaint of actor or crew. Respect, that's what I had for him. And his black suit and skinny tie fit the genre, which maybe is why he'd spot me every so hour and observe how you might an aberration in the woods. Comfortable with his attention, I touched my hat next glance. "Howdy, sir. Greetings." And Huffy Rizzo came hissing, "What the fucking shit?" He took a swig from his flask, and I knew then if I made 50, he did triple for nothing but supervision, which constituted trips to the flask. "Saying aye is all," I said, and that's when Hitchcock called in that Brit vernacular and asked me to join him. The wig didn't itch, which surprised me. It was gray as I guess zinc is, and the dress seemed tailored for my length and shoulders. But this wasn't why I'd been chose. Tony Hopkins, Norman, wasn't right for the shot. His profile was too birdy, Hitchcock explained, and he hadn't the proper id as an ego for mother. On account, Tony had to hide his homosexuality. A weight fared well as a stabbing killer on the move, but not still, in silhouette. We sat alone. The dressing room mirror was long as a hallway, lit by a chorus line of bulbs, and my reflection felt like a face had been skinned off, which is what I said. And Hitchcock laughed, 'cause he'd imagined the same. "You know, don't you, eh?" he said. I did. What he saw most others wouldn't, even when they could. And the melancholy of this didn't ever go away. I adjusted my dress. "Real and not real," I said. Hitchcock replied, "Indeed." So if you ever want a sense of my contours, that's me, standing in the second floor window of the Bates house. My black shape is unwelcoming as a drawn shade. Apparently the film's gotten famous and is considered a cinema classic, and I've been immortalized forever. It was one take. When the film captured me, the lights behind melting my essence onto celluloid, I did what Hitchcock said, played myself, staring down from high and contained what I contained and saw what I saw as I glowered within me and plotted the murder of everyone getting too close to this pain in disguise. Homeless soon after, but $50 bought tacos for a month, which I anticipated with gusto twice per day. I had the mind to stay in LA till an end. Construction paid and acquiring work was a steady proposal. Be a beach bum, eat beef tacos, trowel the cement. I slept well in sand more pliable and fragrant than mare shit. It hadn't rained at all. Though I didn't trust myself to swim and not drown, I'd lay flat near the surf and enjoy the plow of salt water jostling over me. I'd say hi to strangers and then not care about analyzing salutations. This formula stayed airtight through seasons repeated. What wrong could come from such an orchestra? Steady sun sucks the juice from you, and at dark I'd tire and drop my head, but a gluttonous round moon shone one night, my eyelids unable to stop the gremlins. So I walked into the sleeping city, its dimmed opulence, and was prodded to walk more. Every street wound the same to the same place, and I should have stopped, recalling that past moon, pissing and piping and blood splattered, but gremlins stay till done, and they did till I murmured to a likeness of myself that I hadn't been visitor to this mid-city part for such time sufficient. I was aware I'd not been. It was like waking in the oils of a spill you see has become a painting, and being surprised by how the oils move when you touch them. Raw industrials were penned in razor-wired lots, flatbeds and gravel piles, crates and loading docks, and square doors yanked down by fraying ropes. A dome of chain-link fence was cut where a bold thief had tried to steal conceits from those who tossed money like flour. Ramps and dollies and rebar piled for reuse to use with no relent till snapped and sold for scrap in shambolic yards, like the history of ourselves, preserved in still life dust by the ghost of a past day, and then born, like from lightning, like bolts of bleed from stone, were three Dobermans, as shined and hard as slabs of rain-washed granite, muscled beasts barking fierce at me, and from down the street, this strange serpentine music leaking through the red doors of a low building raised in mortar and brick laid in solid keep, so a wind wouldn't blow it down. I thought then, and still do, that what we see is how we are, in a force beam pulled so strong I felt the tectonics underfoot, an unseen conveyor leading to there being a place built on volcanics, and the consequence of small decisions infinitum, the current too wide to step off, an invisible ferryman at the helm. And when I reached its entrance, I reached both arms, securing a handle in each hand, and these doors were heavy and hot as broiled gold. And my thought then, which still is that they were gold, an abhorrence of gold, an alchemist's experiment twisted beyond control to the darkest rouge, to a hole you can't climb from. And when I yanked them doors open to see their reveal, the parting was not see, and I saw the truth. And that's it. Thank you. Let's see here. Laura Hoffman is a United States Marine Corps veteran and recent graduate of the University of North Florida. She's the winner of the 2018 Wainwright Award for Poetry. Hoffman's most recent work appears in Clear Poetry, the Bangalore Review, Bop Dead City, the Gyroscope Review, Tippishly, Left Hooks, Flypaper Magazine, and Atomic Style Society. Hoffman will begin work toward her MFA in poetry writing at the University of Tampa in the summer.
Thank you very much, and I just want to say I am so happy to be here with such a talented group of writers tonight. I'm going to try to do a little bit of confessional free verse as well as some satirical prose, so I hope you enjoy it. This is called Sugarcoat. You left me with beautiful, sugared memories of your disfigured hand and the way it touched me even more perfectly than your whole one, and the way you kissed me when I shouted, "I love you," and every single one of your gray hairs. You left with my belief in a place where the sugar coats our throats and the crystals polish our tongues, and you stay even after you've been inside my candied cottage. I'm empty as a bowl now. Our sugar was the ripple in my veins. Our sugar was splendor and decay. Our sugar was my sweet refusal to accept the anodyne taste of the rest of my tomorrows without you. And this is, thank you very much. This is Fragments of a Gift Horse. Have you seen his teeth? Have you felt the ominous rhythm of his fists against his chest? Have you heard him scream red-faced decibels while the child alive inside you tells your womb to contract and threaten expulsion and leave you with him and his pinball eye whites glazed wet like a mad dog's? The baby who waited it out in my belly and clung to me when I cried wouldn't know what to say now if I asked him, has Daddy shown his teeth? To our shared son, teeth are for smiling and brushing with green Ninja Turtles toothpaste. And so I appeal to you, the new wife of a mad dog passing through a closing threshold with a fresh-cut diamond on your lovely, polished finger. Have you seen his teeth yet? I can show you what they've done. Thank you. This is an American prom night. I was barely 18, and you were 21. You had an ugly little brown spot on a notched front tooth, and you said, you know, a lot. You smoked Newports, so I smoked Newports. You bought me a fifth of Captain, said I made you proud with how I drank and drank. I rolled around laughing in my red prom dress until you put me to bed, your bed. In the morning, you told me I wasn't awake, but it was good for you. Many more nights like this, always nights like this, lost, I cut my hair, you screamed, crazy bitch! Dumped me for a new girl. I stopped eating until I was her size, bleached my curls until they fell away like tiny feathers. You married her. Then in your back seat, you kissed me. I felt your guilt dry on my lips. I felt your guilt. Thank you. This is the plastic Fabergé. Blood flows like cane syrup, and we are of the same vein again, the man with the Roman nose and I. On my dresser, a green Easter egg full of Mary Jane, a gift from him, my plastic Fabergé. Time suspends with the lapping of his black hair against my open chest, and it races with our cheap communion. The sweet nocturne of his motorcycle in the dark wakes me to my folly. Thank you, you're a very nice audience. This is Pawn Shop Mama. The bloodshot man at the value pawn said it was genuine as he fingered the dainty band of white gold, my old metal cherry, its stone, a mystic topaz that winked at me in sparkling Morse code beneath the buzz of lifeless fluorescence. It was the ring that the man with the Roman nose forced over my obstinate pink knuckle all those years ago. I hawked it last Wednesday so that I could buy a carton of milk for another man's babies. Well, thank you. I'm gonna keep thanking you, that's what I do. This is called Cotton Ghosts. We were more loaded than cotton gins on that airless southern night beside a fire in a wheelbarrow. He forgot where I was visiting from, but this time I didn't even give a shit. Off the dirt road, In a thin bed of pine needles, pale lips twitched, eyes found mine. He staggered off to vomit in the woods, leaving me empty on my back, pine needles sticking to my legs. I was still thinking about cotton. You guys are just knocking me out with all this applause. I appreciate it. This is Superstar. I was always Karen Carpenter on karaoke Sundays at the Pirate Bar by the Bay. My glorified fuck buddy, the artist, would turn away from my plaintive singing to light camels in the wind. My cheap plastic cup wine buzz warmed me against the chill that swirled naked off the salt water. I loved him in the most improbable ways, down to his magnificent pigeon-toed foot. But he was cold as the frosted blades of grass. I stood on a soapbox and sang songs that I never owned, wishing I was the one suspended in oil on his canvas. I love the excited noises, like the yeah, like that's encouraging me right now. This is fragments of a prison visit. I lied, and my emissions burst forth from the inseam of his blue prison scrubs. I followed his voice and its cadence borrowed from beasts bobbing one sticky Friday and drove 500 miles under emerald canopies and concertina halos. You see, we had been sending letters for months. All that was left in the canteen was 2 dented cans of Mountain Dew, but I wanted him. There is a certain blind spot in a Florida prison where I robbed the man I'd left back home. And this is where I'm going to go ahead and shift gears to my satirical pieces. I know that we're in Orlando, and you should know that it's a critical piece on something to do with Orlando. I'm just going to leave it there. I don't want to get sued. I know there's trademark everywhere, but this is called Belle. Barely even friends. Then somebody bends unexpectedly. My therapist calls it Stockholm Syndrome. I have a diamond ring that would make Marie Antoinette sob in royal envy. I spend my days locked away in the library. There, I shove a dusty cushion between my broken teeth and scream. I laugh at my hypnotic memories of the muscles rolling beneath his fair skin. We were married immediately after his transformation, but our happiness was extinguished when he threw Lumiere down the steps of the tower in the West Wing. Divorce isn't an option. I've held private meetings with the enchantress who lives just outside of my old provincial town. She took my soft hands into her gnarled ones and told me that my absence would surely reenact the old curse. Before she disappeared into the fog of the forest, she slipped me a small vial. Her parting words advised me that the contents were enough to kill a beast. All right, 2 more. Promise, almost there. This is Sleeping Beauty. I've told the story of waking up to the lips of Prince Charming more times than I can possibly count. It's my favorite device for tantalizing the visiting royalty. I simply can't help myself until the table is occupied by round faces blushing. You want the truth? I would rather sleep forever than feel the touch of his thin, worm-like lips again. I lived a life of revulsion for the first several years of my marriage. Lucky for me, the newly crowned King Charming has become a bit of a peeping Tom. His Majesty spends 12 hours a day crawling through the castle in search of naked chambermaids. I am finally left to my one true love, sleep. Ambien and Valium are a poor substitute for magic slumber, but they are the closest I will ever get to forgetting true love's first kiss. And this is going to be, thank you very much. This is going to be my last piece and my favorite one of this set. This is Ariel. I never became a part of their world. For a time, the kingdom on land advertised me as their most exotic treasure. Now I am being auctioned off to a throng of traveling freak shows. I lost my freedom on the day that I swam into Ursula's inky black waters. My legs are the color of gefelta. I have no womb. Flay me and you will see that I am a fish under my woman suit. When the royal doctor examined me, he told Eric to have me thrown back to my father, King Triton. My heart splashed around in my chest until I heard Eric refuse. My black-haired prince was a bit woozy from all the seawater and Ursula's spell. But I believe he loved me in that moment. I can hear the former sea witch laughing in ecstasy from her watery grave. She knew that I would be unable to give the kingdom an heir or a spare. When I showed my ladies-in-waiting my bright red eggs, they scolded me. Shortly after, I was forcibly removed from the royal bedchamber. It was the morning following Eric's coronation. I awoke to the sound of him vomiting. Our bedroom had assumed the warm scent of the sea, and I found our bed flooded with creamy fish scales. I never became part of their world. Thank you very much. I have a feeling who this is. I hope I pronounce all of this correctly. Sohrab Phrases, okay, is the first Asian American to win the Iowa Short Fiction Award, juried by the Iowa Writers Workshop for his collection Ticket to Minto, Stories of India and America. His novel, Go Home, brought him the South Asian Literary Association's Distinguished Achievement Award. He received the Florida Individual Artist Fellowship in Literature and Fiction. He was artist in residence at Yaddo and visiting writer in residence at Augsburg College.
Bright lights. So I'm going to read from Go Home, my novel, and I'll set the scene up with the opening couple of paragraphs of the novel, which begins with a preamble or prologue or whatever, that is titled, Hear Me. 1981 was a bad year for a Parsi to come to America. The Iran hostage crisis had left Americans with a smoldering resentment of foreigners. Go home, Viraf was told. But where exactly was that? The violence he met was a small kind. When newsmen on Distant Vision spoke of serial killers, it cheapened the petty violence that fell to Viraf. Yet no violence felt small on the receiving end. It rocked him. If only he'd heeded the warning to fix a taillight, he might have managed his fateful clash on Porter Road. Could have looked for the police instead of reasoning with rednecks. A slur he hadn't known then. Still fresh off the boat and seasick, he didn't know redneck from deadhead. So that kind of introduces you to the American cast of characters. Viraf's neighbors are the aforementioned deadheads. So you know there's a scene at a Grateful Dead concert in the novel. But I'm gonna read from a chapter that is foreshadowed called Cowboys and Indians. And just to set that up, there has been a near accident between Viraf and his Pinto, because that's how fresh off the boat he is. He doesn't know better than to buy an old Pinto. And people in a Bronco. uh, who you can't really tell from his deadhead neighbors. And I'm going to jump to the climax, or the climactic portion of that scene. Coming up to East Delaware, he made a right, and the Bronco stayed on his bumper. Impossible now to give them the slip. Better not even look like he was trying. He indicated the turn on Academy Street and onto the access lane for the lab. The road curved around to the parking behind Evans, a rough triangle with the department, laboratory, and storage for its sides. But it was twilight and empty. No one there. It looked different that way, just the dumpster to one side. For an instant of renewed hope, the Bronco was no longer in his rear view. Maybe they'd wondered where he was leading them and decided to turn back. But it rounded the corner, parking quickly as he pulled up in the middle and cut the engine. He got out, locking the door, and took a step toward Evans as the Bronco's doors opened. At the center of this concerted movement, the young woman sat still. In an instant he saw that her face, its broad, almost innocent prettiness, reminded him of Allie's. That put the little group in perspective. Just another trio of young Americans like Doug, Allie, and Bernie. A sort of calm came over him. The area was lighted overhead, illuminating the bigger man as he stepped down from the wheel and flipped his door shut. Its thud gave way to the sound of crickets and the scritch-scratch of boots over pavement. Faintly in the distance, Viraf heard the rumbling of a freight train. Then, the big American was in front of him, taller by inches, and he looked up into those blue eyes for the first time. They held his own, regarding him unblinkingly, even as he became aware of the second guy coming up to his right. There was a controlled edge to the big man's voice. "What do you think you were doing back there?" Viraf struggled to make sense of the question, feeling his forehead knot and his calm start to slip. "What was I doing?" he said, hearing the tension in his voice. "I was turning onto an empty road. How many miles were you doing?" The stranger's voice took on a rasp, and he flipped a thumb at the Bronco. "See my car there? See the paint?" It was as if he hadn't heard Viraf's question. You could see your face in it. 1 month of the lot. 1 month of the lot, and you would have fucked up my new car. Viraf was transfixed by the widening blue eyes. "Listen, I didn't do anything to your car. Nothing really even." But those eyes had gone manic, and the voice that overrode his and froze it into silence had turned to a bellow. "You hear me? Do you hear me, you goddamn dago?" Maybe he was paralyzed by the sheer rage. Such apparent hate blasted at him. Maybe a part of him was confused, distracted by the unfamiliar word, trying to gather what he'd been called. Maybe his peripheral vision, uncorrected by his glasses, as he stared into lunatic eyes, couldn't pick up a blur off to the side. Whatever the case, the right hand of the big American must have begun its hidden elliptical swing before the final word was uttered. Must have been coming around as Viraf took in the absurdly rhetorical question. He was struggling for words when something like a pile driver slammed into his head and he was spinning. Then, pain erupted from the left side of his jaw. The blow unseated his glasses, sent him staggering toward the other man, who must have known what was about to happen as soon as the argument began. His fist drove into Viraf's stomach, doubling him up before he could bring his hand to his jaw. As his breath grunted out, the man grabbed his arms from behind and pinned them back.
The bigger man moved in, shouting, "Do you hear me, you stupid wop?" His fist drove into Viraf's body as he twisted free. It hit his ribs at an angle, but he was off balance, turning his head and lifting his hands to take the other man's blows on his arms. And for a moment, his eyes fell on the woman in the Bronco. She was sitting there upright, looking straight at him, drinking in the spectacle with a thin smile on her face. It crushed something in him, that cold little smile. The next instant, the second man's fist cracked home to the side of his face, sending his glasses flying. He reeled backward, unseeing, everything a blur, through which the smaller, more relentless man reappeared, rushing him, cornering him against a dumpster, ringing hollow against his back. It gave off a faint stench. The man's knees drove up at Viraf's crotch again and again. He jerked reflexively away from them, fending them off, catching them on his palms and his thighs. But his balls were already broken, and he was scrambling toward the rear door of Evans, hearing the slap of feet behind him and the big man's voice, "Let him go," as he reached the steps. Then the blessed door in front, and fumbling for the key, listening for the feet to come up at him, stooping desperately to see the keyhole without his specs. Now he was in and slamming the door behind him, slumping against it to the floor, insipid trickles in his mouth, breathing raggedly in the dim, empty hallway. His mind stayed blank as he looked into nothingness, feeling his heart pump, hearing his breath. A confusion of pain still coursed through him. Then a thought, and his heart began to pound. The Pinto. He listened for sounds through the door and heard something. Reaching up along the door jamb, he dragged himself to his feet. What were they doing? Slashing its tires? Kicking its sides in? Smashing the windows, the windshield, the headlights? He put a shaking hand to the doorknob, but his muscles refused to turn it. The blood hammered in his ears and he broke into sweat. He knew he had to go out, and what? His mind shrank from finishing the thought. The hand would not stop shaking. But he turned it and yanked the door open. Thanks.
Wow, well, thank you all for coming and for taking part. I hope you will chat amongst yourselves. Please remember to take your wine glasses back to the kitchen, right, Wendy? Is that-
Yes.
And what else do we need to tell them?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you guys for
Thank
coming.
you all so much. And if y'all want to gather outside, we do need to let these nice people go home, but we can gather out front and